You cannot differentiate. When you have a mental problem, I have had a mental problem. I've had a mental problem all my life. You're stigmatized that you are a loser. And I think we should break that stigma. My mother and two of my best friends. Carolyn died of melanoma. Diana died in a car crash, and Mum died in a car crash. And the complex trauma and post-traumatic stress trauma, not just from that, but also from being thrust into the public life. I think the first thing to do on this podcast is to explain what self-sabotage is. It's when you get to a point where you really want to prove that everyone that doesn't like you.
It doesn't matter, business leader, political leaders, and so on. We get into a point of time where actually showing vulnerability can be seen as a strength. You know, there's Fergie, there's the Duchess. Was there a point where you felt you had to reclaim Sarah?
Sarah was long gone. She's come back now. There are many solutions to many different things, and some of them are not what is the norm, but what is norm?
Yeah.
Who is norm?
Yeah.
And the last thing is the Queen said to me, Sarah,
So today we have Sarah, the Duchess of York, and we said we'll talk about all mental health.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a chance to talk in the last few days a bit.
Well, it's thanks to you, Jan, for bringing me to Zurich and to your extraordinary organisation here, and to learn, look, listen, learn, show up and amplify. And I guess this is the amplifying moment.
Right.
Yeah. It's nice to see you, and thank you for your hospitality. You've been very kind and generous.
It's a great pleasure having you. And
Lovely people.
A lot of the things behind the scenes, in between sessions and meals and sit downs, is often the conversation goes very much to how much you care about mental health. Obviously, you have your own lived experience. It seems to me like every person you encounter, in your head, there seems to be an inquiry, a curiosity. How is that person doing? Often you ask right out.
I think, Jan, the secret to doing what we love to do in life, I don't know what you love to do in life, but I know what I love to do in life, which is I love to listen to the heart of people. I believe that every person I meet has the right to respect, has the right to be heard, and no matter race, creed, colour, or any other denomination. I think it's very exciting that that this stigma of mental health, which is unspoken or verboten to speak about, that you, Jan, have been sort of amplifying the fact that every single person on the planet has the right to be heard. Mm-hmm. And point two, it made me think, well, gosh, how do I learn what he's achieved and work with the great Dr. Beck and understand about the stigma of substance abuse and what is the stigma of mental health, of which I've had 35 years of therapy for my own mental health. So I think this podcast is also to amplify your work and to amplify the incredible gift you've given the world by having I always think if you make a cake, you have to have all the ingredients on the shelf, don't you? And then you make a cake. Well, if you come to Paracelsus, you have all the ingredients in one place, and then you can come out as a well-cooked cake.
But you still have to bake yourself, and that's an important part in healing, right? Nobody can take that job for you.
No.
So, you have to walk that.
You do.
That path yourself.
And that is very hard work.
It is.
I mean, the easy road to mental health, there is not one. But there are solutions. And I was diagnosed, which I rather enjoy. He said no diagnosis, but he said, we're not going to do diagnosis, says Dr. Thilo Beck. But, and I wanted to correct him and said, no, goats, but. Yeah, it's and, but I didn't. So I said, Dr. Thilo, having just been told I was a nice redhead, and he liked redheads, I said, so what do you think? Could you diagnose me? And he said, well, we're not diagnosing today. However, if we were, I would say that you would show signs of complex post-traumatic stress disorder. And I went, yes, at last, somebody has completely acknowledged that I am normal in a way. What is normal? Normal is that I am complex. I have been through enormous traumas, either to myself, for myself, or people to me. But it's still traumas. My mother was decapitated in a car when I was 30-something, and she was 61. My best friend the next year was killed in a car crash, which was Princess of Wales. The next year, my best friend, there was 3 major years when I lost all 3 matriarchal heads of my belief in my heart. My mother and 2 of my best friends. Carolyn died of melanoma, where she lived out melanoma through her whole body on the outside. And Diana died in a car crash, and Mum died in a car crash. And I think that my mother brought massive joy into my life. And even though she was miles away and I didn't see her, she was just such a joyful, extraordinary, effervescent person. So I lost that sense of joy when she died in a car crash. And then Diana was my best friend from when I was 14, and my just most incredible, funny, extraordinary sister and sister-in-law. And Carolyn was no question my angel. So I'd lost my 3 major hooks and anchors that had got me through from Gen Z to now I was 40, your age. And I'm not even 40, 38 or something. Same age as my daughters now. And just that is it is terrifying, because you really are, you feel like you're sinking. And there's nobody
who or what
there.
did you turn to in that moment? Or did you deal with it yourself?
I dealt with it myself,
Right.
which probably turned me back to food again. So,
Yeah, food is a coping mechanism, such as our addictions or other things, right? Yeah.
And then I probably went on the road to sabotage.
And that's quite a young age to kind of enter a role, and in a way,
and learn.
And then you find yourself possibly in a kind of living out a script that's not really fully your own, right? Is that at the time, did you realize that this might become problematic for you at some point, or how did you cope with kind of being thrown into that at that early age?
I think the Her Majesty the Queen is such an extraordinary legend that, she's been with me all my life, and she's been with the nation all the life of the nation, and the British nation, and in the globe, really, in the planet, and I think you have so much respect that you add more pressure on yourself to be perfect. And I think that to be the perfect princess, well, where is the rule book for the perfect princess? And I think if ever we look at leadership, we see Her Majesty as a great example, but how are you ever going to be that example? So you're going to have to polish your own self a bit more and become even more enthusiastic, or more this or more that, more the other, until eventually you do combust. Because you're not being yourself.
And I think that's in a way that's a very universally human experience, right? I mean, you lived it at a very publicly exposed level, but anybody joining, another family where they feel that there are high expectations, or they enter, a role in a company or represent a brand or anything, it's that projection of what's expected of myself, that we can put a lot of additional pressure on ourselves on top of the actual pressure that's there. And as you say, that can lead to combustion at some point.
Combustion is a good word, isn't it?
It is.
You like that word?
Yeah, I do.
And you can combust. You can have a mental breakdown. You can have an attack of massive depression. You can have a breakdown. A serious breakdown. Or you can fall into your own traps. and therefore beat yourself up and prove you're unworthy and you sabotage your life.
Yeah.
So anyone who's listening, the real reason why I wanted to talk to Jan and introduce you to Jan through my followers, to you, Jan, is to say that that we are all the same. And we really, truly are. And you cannot differentiate. When you have a mental problem, I have had a mental problem. I've had a mental problem all my life, but I've worked on it. And I am a work in progress. I am a canvas in progress. And I want to paint a painting that is coming from a place of understanding rather than splats on the wall.
Yeah, that's a very beautiful.
Thank you.
Very
I
beautiful
thought it was
sentiment.
rather beautiful.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I think we'll make a note of that one, Jan.
We should. Yeah. The painting. Yeah. That's
It's
right.
good, isn't
You
it?
have to paint with
Well,
what
when
you've
I got a mastectomy, they didn't say it was a lump. They said it was a splat.
Okay, so it's very.
So splatted for me means you've been.
There's a certain momentum, a certain force.
Combustion. Yes,
it's like
yes. Good one. Yeah, you're very eloquent, Jan.
I couldn't help
and
but
I like Jan's shoes. For those of you who are listening and you're not watching, they're very smart shoes.
Thank you, Duchess.
Where are they from, sir? Or maybe not.
I think it's an Italian brand, but we don't want to advertise anybody here on this
They're
podcast.
Very nice. Yeah.
But a thought that just entered my mind, when nobody really prepares one, nobody prepared you, nobody prepares someone to be thrown into that role of pressure and expectations. So in many ways, I think the only way to cope with it is the resources we've got. And some people might have more resources than others, both genetically, both in terms of their upbringing and, where they're already at when they're thrown into the system. But there's not really a way to prepare other than be aware, right? So if we can teach our next generations earlier on, this kind of self-awareness, how am I feeling, what's good for me, what's not good for me, what's okay, it's probably the only way to.
Well, yeah, and you're very young. So I'm 65 and I was brought up with never to look and talk about yourself.
Yeah.
So to talk about yourself is selfish. You mustn't have self-care. You must give to others.
Right.
That's it. You're breaking a pattern in your own life because you're young. But the real young people that I love to talk to are Gen Z and anyone that wants to just be themselves. I love talking to them because they don't judge me.
Right.
And I love being the generational bridge between Gen Z and the outside world. What does that mean? It means look, listen, learn, show up with purpose and amplify. How do you do that? You say, please explain to me how you feel. So then you hope that the person is illuminating their what they require, what they wish, what is their thought process. And then I hope I can try and guide them on a journey from my own mistakes, from my own ramifications of my own actions. They can relate to it. Oh, Fergie, we read about that. You know?
So you feel that today's younger generations, they're growing up in an environment where the dialogue is already happening. People are more aware. They're more, in contrast to what you said, the way you grew up, kind of, basically suck it up, don't, stiff up a lip, I think is a saying, right?
Yes.
Is don't show to the outside what's going on the inside. You feel that's generally a big shift in generations now?
Yes, I think the Gen Z...
That's a hopefulness.
I love being with young people, Jan. I love it. I love being with somebody like when I first met Lester. And I said, oh, Lester, I'm going to be the Gen Z generational bridge for Lester and for young people. And so Lester says, well, why do you think you can? Why do you think Gen Z want to follow you? Why do you think Gen Z, but you're older, you're much older. And I went, good point. Well, firstly, before we go on, may I ask you how you'd like me to address you? And Lester said, Lester. And I went, Lester. So who's judging who here? Because you judged me, but I didn't judge you. And I think it's because when I was the 14-year-old that lost her mother to live in Argentina, I want to be 14, 15, 16, 17. I want to relate because I want to grow, and I never knew those years. I was in the bottom of an ice cream pot, having an eating disorder. And so I'm reliving my lost Sarah from the days of my Gen Z through learning from all of my young friends who are now Gen Z. And I really, really love it. And I really believe that this podcast today has made me understand that as to the why.
Okay. Brilliant. I like that. So there's a concept of kind of reparenting, right? So you go back, and then some of the things left out, you catch up on. So you're kind of at the same level as the Gen Z is in a way. So to that,
learn to relate.
Learn to relate, yeah. And from that,
grow within yourself.
Grow within yourself,
and talk
it helps
to that
healing.
Teenage Sarah or Gen Z Sarah.
So and talking about the Gen Z, so a lot of them are posting quite different lives than the actual inner world, but even maybe the immediate actual world looks like, to a degree where that projected world on social media becomes much more important to them. It can really blur identities. And since you like to speak to the Gen Z, in a way you had possibly not the social media, but an experience that is quite related. Projecting a different role or a different state of mind also in many cases than your inner world might have looked like. So what would you say to the Gen Z, those, especially many of them make or try to make a living on social media and possibly losing themselves in the process?
Must be a very frightening place for them. It must be very frightening.
But it's a place you've been yourself.
No, because I was never polished. That's the only difference, Jan, is that I was not polished. I lost Sarah, but I didn't know another Sarah. There was just the shadow Sarah.
Right.
I didn't know there was two different polishes. And so I thought it was perfectly normal to not be aware of your feelings, to be. I thought that was how you are, and it took me a long, long time to realize there is the light and the dark. And Freud was right, light and dark. J.M. Barrie was right with Peter Pan, showing the shadow onto Peter's foot. So for any Gen Z out there, I would really try really hard to not be what you think everybody wants you to be, just be who you are. I think the Gen Z group, the Youth Impact Army that I started, Youth Impact Council it's called, is showing that they don't believe substance abuse. They don't believe in alcoholism. They don't believe that they like mocktails. They like to knit. They like to crochet. They like to do board games. They're much more the community spirit. And well, that's very interesting, isn't it? That you go back to the the village hall in World War II was where everybody met and the communities met, and they all talked to each other.
That's an interesting observation there, because some books I actually read recently brought that to my awareness much more. We are all tribal animals in a way. We need community. And we've built a society that is actually going in quite an opposite direction. So when I came across some statistics that during war times, actually mental health wards they empty out rather than filling up, because people get a sense of purpose. We come together, we support each other, and then in the absence of kind of real actual threat or crisis, we kind of we dissolve into individuals almost, or just very small kind of family nuclei, and that doesn't seem to be very healthy for us. So it can be very lonely.
I think when you think you're on your own with mental health, and you think that you're having a breakdown, you think you're a burden to people, which doesn't help. You go into lack of self-worth and sabotage, but you also need to isolate yourself on your own, because you don't know how to deal with such terrifying mental thoughts of of where do I go, and what happens if I admit vulnerability. And I think vulnerability is the key to say, I feel strange today. I don't know why I feel so strange. Or I feel this, or I feel that. I think a lot more people, that's probably why we're doing the podcast, is people need to feel rather than think. What do you feel? How do you feel today? Is it a difficult day, you know?
And even that can be difficult to start with, right? It takes practice to really kind of be able to
learn to feel, to learn to forgive yourself, authentic forgiveness of whatever you're allegedly meant to have done wrong.
Yeah.
And who's the judge?
Yeah.
One question.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, who's the judge?
Yeah, exactly. You know, a lot of people, or a lot of the clients here at Paracelsus Recovery, they come from very privileged backgrounds. And somehow it seems that people with, you know, who feel that they're privileged either from a wealth status, family name, there is dissent both from the public, but often also from, you know, people from this demographic themselves, that they're less allowed to be struggling than everybody else because of that privilege. So there is often guilt, shame, and that even, you know, that leads to more isolation and loneliness than, you know, all things equal, if somebody didn't have the material privilege. Is that something that resonates?
I think that when a mouse is either running from a cat, he either stops and it becomes paralyzed, or runs into the corner and hides from the big cat. And therefore, I think it's really important that that you are providing a place which can be very safe here. And I think Paracelsus is key, that you're not just doing it for rich, entitled people or heads of state or heads of business. You're doing it in order to harness the awareness of each individual and whatever their needs are. And there are many people that must come to Paracelsus who simply cannot be seen to be in a program to help themselves. And, you know, I think you mentioned it, that it could be that stock price goes down or something, you know.
Yeah, there can be real material implications.
Yeah, I think that's really important.
And often it's difficult to distinguish what is, you know, actual danger or risks and what is, again, self-imposed pressure or kind of conditioning almost, if you know, lift up into a career or in a public institution or a family or not what. In a way you condition yourself and you get conditioned by the environment, and you can't show weakness, right? And that's still a thing today, don't you think, that mental struggles or being open about it is perceived as equaling weakness?
It's very much a perception of stigma that you are mentally ill. And, you know, when you're brought up with my age group, you're locked up in a
still happens in many places in the world actually today, right?
Definitely, and you're locked up and thrown away the key.
Yeah.
And, you know, left to sit in a chair rocking. Yeah. And that is the stigma of mental health. I don't think Cuckoo's Nest, the film, helped, did it? But it's very much the what I'm hoping to break, because the you know, you break your ankle and you put a plaster cast on and everyone says, "Oh dear, what have you done?" You know, you put the scars of the heart are there, but you can't see them. And mental health, you're stigmatized that you are a loser. And I think we should break that stigma, which is what you're doing.
And what I'd actually like to double down there with is just from my own experience, is it does seem for most people very scary to, you know, communicate outwards that you're currently in a very bad state, because then we are very vulnerable, and then we even it can amplify the anxiety. But and I've experienced this myself. You know, I was kind of at the edge of not being able to cope anymore, and I was about to go on stage and talk about mental health, actually, in a room full of, you know, very say important, wealthy people who gathered in that place to hear from me, and it was and I had tears in my eyes, and I was really. 2 minutes before going up on stage, I didn't know would I have to call it off, and then the pressure of expectation. I'm going to do this, but somehow, you know, the nerves didn't really allow me just to kind of suck it up and be like, okay, for this next 1 hour, I'm going to do this mental health masterclass. And it was the best bit of the conference. I got so much positive feedback. Everybody was like, well, that's so vulnerable, so I know, relatable in a way. And I think that's I think a very important message also that, it doesn't matter, business leader, political leaders, and so on. I think we are getting to a time, that's my view, and I would really like to ask you what your perspective on that is. But we're getting to a point of time where actually showing vulnerability can be seen as a strength. It's inspiring. Because all of us, when we follow leaders of whichever sort, we want to be inspired. And if it's relatable, oh, he or she also suffers pain. I suffer pain. Pain is universal. I think that's a very powerful message.
Firstly, congratulations for going up on stage. Well done, and persevering.
Yeah, thank you.
No, that's great. So that would be the first thing. Second thing is you left people walking away with nuggets in their pockets, right? So that they can use that as an example of your vulnerability gave them strength. So to show your true peacock feathers in that way was very good. And the third thing is that to admit that you have been through enormous challenges yourself, and that's why here you are meant to be making a huge speech at a mental health conference. That is enormous to lead by example. Both of us have come from this place of self-judgment. I personally have massive self-hatred, self-judgment, non-forgiveness, and just a non-understanding really of all the different kinds of Sarah that are wallowing around in my head. So for you to give this place and space, thank you.
Thank you for being so open about that. And also I remember you spoke in the past publicly about, I think you said something like in some moments you almost want to be unlovable. And just a few minutes ago we spoke about self-sabotage that a lot of people experience in their life. Is that something you still experience, and how do you deal with this?
But I think the first thing to do on this podcast is to explain what self-sabotage is. It's when you get to a point where you really want to prove that everyone that doesn't like you. So you go out of your way to do things subconsciously,
exactly.
or unconsciously, subconsciously, and then you suddenly find yourself in an enormous big poo trap. Poo trap meaning Winnie the Pooh, because Piglet always sets traps for Winnie to fall into, and I call them poo traps because they really are poo traps. Because they're. How do you describe self-sabotage? What is what is self-hatred? What is unworthiness? All these words. What is insecurity? A long time ago, wanted to write a dictionary of these words that we throw them out, Jan. You're insecure. What's that mean? Well, you look at life with rose-colored glasses. Yes, I do, but what does that mean? So all of these words that people have thrown at me, that, you're oversensitive, you're this, you're that, you're fat, you're ugly, you're this. You get to a point where, bring it on. What else can you throw at me? And I think that is from learning and polishing the edges of. So if anyone's listening, self-sabotage means that you really don't like yourself at all, and you go and make traps for yourself. And then you become a victim on those traps, or a punisher, or a savior. And the key is in the triangle.
And then when the archetypes.
Savior, punisher, victim. We can all do the victim. Oh, poor me. I know. It's raining today. Oh, dear. Shut up. Get out of your way. You're fine. Let's go. Come on. You got this. Or the savior. Don't worry. I can rescue this person or that person. And then the punisher, I failed.
Where do you see yourself on that triage?
I see myself continually feeling every single one of those. And no, not circling, because I see it as a triangle. It's difficult to go around a triangle.
You can do a circle around.
You could, but then you're leaving big gaps. But I see myself in the center of the triangle, aware that you could be a savior, you could be a victim, you could be a punisher, and you have to focus and really be aware every single minute of the day. And that's why mental health is something of a challenge.
Do you think savor is a coping mechanism for yourself that you
100%.
because I mean that I get when people follow you publicly, but then every conversation also with you in private is always about others and who can I help and who can I inspire and whose life can I improve.
Yeah.
That kind of resonates on that corner of the triangle.
Thank you.
Right?
You can only do your best job, and I've got to learn that. But you're right. You've noticed that about me, and I am, and it's something to be aware of. And I'm very lucky that I've studied mental health for so long now that I can be very, very authentically honest about myself. I mean, literally so honest that it's sort of hysterical, really.
Well, hysterical / funny, and then you have an amazing sense of humor.
So do you, luckily.
We talked about.
Oh my gosh!
Don't, but. And humor is a great coping mechanism.
I will
right,
give you an example of Jan's humor. Yesterday, when we left here, we're at Paracelsus. Jan said, "Now just remember, it's self-care. You have to put the oxygen mask on yourself, and you have to look after yourself." And I'm going, "Oh, please don't tell me that again. Don't tell me that again. I know. Oh, shut up, Jan. I'm fine." And I suddenly went back to the residence and I went, "Oh my God, I just told Jan, who's the founder of Paracelsus, to shut up. I didn't mean that. I'm very sorry about that. I hope you laughed." And luckily, James and everyone went, No, wait, he's fine. He has a sense of humor. But I'm
glad to explain to you that I do have a sense of humor.
Yes, it was very lucky, wasn't it? And I thought to myself, well, because I was joking when I said it, but you were right. It was just, okay, I know, and I'm redheaded.
But interesting, that's exactly the thought I had in my head now when we were talking about the saver archetype and helping others and lifting others up. And I remember I told you that 2 or 3 times in our conversations, and I recalled exactly that conversation as well. You can only help others to the degree you take care of yourself. And so I say it's about a balance. If you try to stay in the middle of that triangle, and when you see yourself going too far in one direction.
Well, also the other non-diagnosis part of my new great friend, Dr. Beck, is he said, "I'm not diagnosing you, but have you ever thought about ADHD?" Right? And then I thought, interesting. So on one hand, you can have compulsive post-traumatic stress trauma disorder. And then on the other hand, you have ADHD, which can cause you not to focus and everything. But how wonderful. You can have a bit of everything and then stay in the middle of the seesaw. Right? Which is spiritual maturity. So how fantastic that you can acknowledge all those different non-diagnosis points that he made. But on the other hand, isn't that okay too? So I am a mixed bag of jumping jelly beans. Isn't that great? There's so many different sides of Sarah. I like to play with all my little friends, which are all myself. And therefore it means, at last, Jan, I might have decided I quite like Sarah, because I've accepted all those funny jumping jelly beans.
That's also a beautiful sentiment from the picture painted now the jumping jelly beans. Fantastic. Because I do recall us from a...
You can call me Beanie.
Oh, no, that would add another personality to Duchess, to Fergie, to Sarah and Beanie.
I've just added another character, yeah.
Might get a bit too many at some point. Was there a point, because I think you talked about this in the past as well, is I think you used the analogy of costumes in a wardrobe. There's Fergie, there's the Duchess.
Good memory.
Was there a point where you felt you had to reclaim Sarah? Was that kind of a conscious insight, or did that kind of grow over time that you might have been losing yourself in these roles?
I think that the Sarah was long gone. She's come back now, but therefore you mustn't feel guilty about leaving her. It's just that you were ignorant. You didn't realize you were leaving her. myself. And I think that
So is there a sense of self-forgiveness in that?
it is only self-forgiveness. You wish that you could have learnt it earlier, but how can you wish you learn it? Because unless you do the lessons, you're ignorant. And that is very important for anyone listening to this podcast. You can't beat yourself up. You do, you will, and you do, and boy, shoulda, woulda, coulda. Nah, it happens at the right moment. If I had learnt any quicker about the extraordinary melange of different people with me, I would have gone into fear.
Right.
And the fear would have kicked me into even more mental depression. Right. Now, I am lucky enough to never have really gone into deep depression. I've gone into a massive breakdown, but not deep depression, which it's not in my genes.
Good for you.
Yeah, I know.
What about fear? You just mentioned fear, and particularly in such a public role.
Yeah. Fear to paralyze.
Technically, you can be afraid of anything. It's because any side comment, any hair looking out of place, or any little detail could impose fear, right? How are you dealing with that?
Well, it was one of the things we wanted to talk to you about here, and one of them is my nerve endings shot from fear, and one of my big things is that when I walk into a restaurant, I always sit with my back to the wall, so I can see what's going on, because I'm always fearful about being shocked.
Yeah, probably because of years or decades of being on very high alert. That's kind of a constant high baseline of stress.
Yeah.
That then it kind of tears and wears away on your nervous system. Right.
A dog's barking too loud.
Right.
My nervous system is very well. It's very heightened. I have a heightened sense of getting ready to run. The sword of Damocles is close to the top of my head.
You still experience that?
Yes.
More or less or same?
More.
So that's increasing.
Yeah.
What are you doing to cope with that?
I'm illuminating I'm illuminating that little mouse that's paralyzed. We're all little mice, really.
Spot on. Actually, I remember something else you said along the lines, you don't want to grow with thicker skin, but you'd rather understand where the pain comes from.
That's very good. Did I say that?
Yes, you did.
Oh, well done. Yeah, well done. People always interrupt me and say, oh, yeah, but you've got a thick skin now, haven't you? And honestly, no, my skin is much thinner than it's ever been. Partly from melanoma, but also partly because I am stratospherically sensitive. So my sensitivities have heightened from more of the trauma that I've been through recently.
So all things equal, is that good or bad?
It is what it is.
It is what it is.
Yeah. There's no good, no bad, no judgment. It is just another work in progress.
Yeah. So some people might grow with thicker skin in order to deal with what life throws at them. And other people either don't have the ability to, or they decide consciously not to.
And
I just found that a very powerful statement.
Thank you.
That you'd rather look at the pain, understand the pain, and then, I guess by extension, my interpretation, work with the pain to work through the pain.
I really enjoy the pain in a bizarre way, because it means I'm feeling, and I'm learning, and I'm deciding, instead of being numbed like the paralyzed mouse.
Does it give you a sense of agency? That's kind of, you can do something with this. I can learn from this. I'm in control.
There are solutions, and when you come to a place like Paracelsus, you can see that it's okay. There are many solutions to many different things, and some of them are not what is the norm, but what is norm?
Yeah.
Who is norm?
Yeah.
And I'm really excited that there are so many different solutions.
That's the thing. There's no one size fits all, right? And I think that sense of normal. I mean, at the very beginning of our chat here, when you talked about CPTSD, and in a way that is normal. It's any reaction to anything that life throws at us. It cannot be considered not normal because it's happening. So it's we need to be very careful that we don't use normal as an equivalent, or not normal as equivalent of to judge this is a right or wrong or a good or bad reaction. It's just people react to emotions and trauma and triggers the way they do. It's about finding ways to do it
variety,
kinder.
Variety, and understanding and listening and talking and being gracious and respectful and going the extra mile and remembering the old-fashioned values of kindness. And why judge? What everybody is. There's this book out at the moment by Mel Robbins called Let Them. And I think it's really important. Just let them be what they are. And you don't have to be. Who is judging who is normal?
Yeah.
And when someone dies, I always write to the person saying, I'm so sorry for your loss. You are now going to have to get used to a new normal.
Yeah. It's a true. New normal, exactly. That shows that there's not just one normal.
So you can keep going with whatever. So it means there's always hope. And there's always a moment in time.
I know kindness is very close to your heart, and from when we met in London, you talked about the work you do around kindness, and also I think the research, what kindness can do and for kids growing up, and also as an emotional healing. So love, kindness, compassion, and again, when people follow what you do, and also interacting with you directly, one gets that sense that there's enormous kindness, there's enormous compassion, there's enormous love coming from you, from Sarah Fergie, the Duchess.
My jelly beans.
But your jelly beans, exactly. But love and kindness for emotional healing, in a way, it's a two-way street. And often for people who have, kind of a lived experience such as yours, and you've touched on that, and the kind of the self-hatred and all that, being able to accept kindness and accept love is, for, let's say, a more global sense of healing is almost equally important than giving it. What do you feel you're at there at this balance? Is that something that, I don't know, you still feel is work in progress to accept appreciation or love? Or
I think that when I worked for Weight Watchers for 12 years, I had a weight problem, and I didn't go into rehab for my eating disorder. I went out to work, and I went on the public stage, and I learned from every single person that came on the stage what was their secret for weight loss. I absolutely threw myself into understanding weight and food, and my whole life was about food, and my life was in the small little corner of the box. And I then managed, after 12 years, to move my life to the whole box and put Weight Watchers down to the side, because I had compartmentalized where my pain was and why I was using food as my source of comfort. To come to answer your question about where I am with my kindness and loving myself, I believe that if I can get kindness taught, Donna Young believes you can teach kindness on the curriculum, and if I can get kindness on the curriculum, that would be a great legacy for me, to bring primary children in to understand that kindness can be taught. It's quite extraordinary to think that we just got complacent enough to think that kindness was within us. It's not. It has to be taught. So in doing that, in doing that, I wonder whether I've got to teach myself. How easy is it for me to accept kindness from others? Nearly impossible. How is it to think I believe it, or need it, or wish it? I wish I did, and I wish I could receive better. I did receive a compliment from my friend Tiller, because I believed that it was such an extraordinary thing to say out of the blue that he liked redheads, that really I realized that maybe I wasn't quite so mentally unhealthy as I thought I was. And that was an interesting reaction.
Because you could accept that genuine
logically accept it. Everything has to be cerebrally, logically for me to accept.
Oh, that's your filter. It has to go through your logic filter.
Yes. I can't just be because I'm me. and me is good enough. And the last thing is, the Queen said to me, Sarah, just being yourself is good enough. And I need to keep reminding myself that the greatest late living legend for 72 years on the throne of England told me that myself was good enough.
And that's such a powerful sentiment. I think for anybody listening and anybody in this world, we're all good enough. You're good enough. And that can be a very powerful baseline. There's still, with that intellectual insight, lots of work can start happening. Right?
Yes. Do you believe you're good enough?
I've come to work hard on that most times, yes.
Nice. Nice. But you see, anyone listening to this, we are two alleged adults. Exactly. Well, I'm not an adult, but...
what is that? Right?
Yeah, what is that? But both admitting that it's okay. It's okay. So honestly, to say that you're not very good at receiving, I can go out of this door and still work on it. It's not...
Well, the work never ends.
Never
right?
Never ends. Never ends.
A lot of people have that view that the pain of people in public spotlight or with privilege is a different kind of pain. And we've just talked here that pain is very universal. Is there something that might be surprising, for people who are listening, when it comes to that presumption from your own experience?
I don't think it's surprising, because authentic Fergie has certainly done everything that she could possibly do, or I could possibly do, and it's always been highlighted in the public stage. So I don't think people... I think people just accept that I am just out here testing the waters of life. And I don't think it's surprising that I speak openly about mental health, which I now am campaigning about. That I really would, and today's a big day for me, to really, really, now, come on, we got to get this. Because if I can talk publicly about it, so can you.
100%. That's a very powerful statement and sentiment. Is that I always like to say that pain is real. It doesn't matter, what your last name is or your accomplishments or your status. And I think it can be also very powerful for anybody to realize that, the people we all, look up to, who always look very composed to lead, countries or business or institutions or the faces of, they're equally human beings with lived experiences, such as your very powerful lived experience. And I'm hopeful, I know that a lot of inspiration can be drawn from, people such as yourself, talking about the lived experience. Because in a way, then it's relatable, and people who suffer in silence, no matter what their walks of life, listening to this, it can give more the sense, if she's lived it with all that, maybe it's okay that I lived that too, and it's okay for me to actually be vulnerable there and seek help and talk about it with others. So thank you for that.
Thank you.